안녕하세요.
The headquarters of Hanul Group, one of South Korea's largest corporations, stood imposingly in the heart of Seoul. With its mirrored facade reflecting the intense hustle and bustle of the city, the building symbolized the power and influence of the Kim family. At the top of this empire, Kang Ji-hoon, the young and relentless CEO, commanded with a cold and calculating demeanor. From an early age, he had been shaped to lead, bearing the weight of his family's and shareholders' expectations. For him, there was no room for distractions or emotions. In the administrative sector, Yoon Ha-ri tried to balance a stack of documents, her phone, and a hot cup of coffee. The morning had already started off hectic, and she was late to submit a crucial report. Working at Hanul Group was a dream for anyone, but for Ha-ri, it meant much more. A chance to change her life and help her family. An orphan, she had grown up seeing her mother sacrifice everything to support her, and now finally, she had a stable job. However, the last thing she needed was to draw the CEO's attention in a negative way. When the elevator doors opened, she hurried out, not noticing the figure walking toward her. The collision was inevitable. The hot coffee flew through the air before splashing onto Ji-hoon's immaculate shirt, staining the white silk fabric. Time seemed to stop as absolute silence fell over the corridor. Assistants and employees around them froze, eyes wide with shock. Ha-ri felt her heart race. Her whole body tensed, and her trembling hands tried, unsuccessfully, to clean the stain. "My God, I'm so sorry," she exclaimed, her voice full of desperation. "I didn't see you. I mean, sir, too." Ji-hoon looked down at his stained shirt, and then back at the young woman in front of him. Any other employee would have been dismissed without hesitation. He didn't tolerate mistakes. But something in Ha-ri's anxious eyes made his anger lessen. There was a spark there, a mixture of fear and determination that intrigued him. "Are you always this distracted?" he asked, his voice firm, but lacking the cutting coldness he usually used. Ha-ri opened her mouth to respond, but the words died in her throat. She knew anything she said could make things worse. I'm really sorry. If you need, I'll pay for your shirt." She quickly bowed, feeling the heat rise in her face. The last sentence made Ji-hoon raise an eyebrow. It was the first time someone had offered to pay for one of his belongings. Normally, people just begged for forgiveness or panicked. "Do you think you can afford this?" He grabbed the cuff of his stained shirt. Ha-ri swallowed hard. The answer was obvious. Her entire yearly salary might not even cover half of that piece. But she refused to be just another employee who grovels before him. "I'll figure it out." Her voice came out firm, surprising even herself. Ji-hoon fell silent for a moment, evaluating her. Finally, he let out a short sigh and gestured for his assistants to move on. "Forget it. Just be more careful next time." With that, he walked away, leaving Ha-ri frozen in the hallway. The employees who witnessed the scene exchanged incredulous looks. Ji-hoon never let mistakes slide, especially when something affected his image. So why had he been so tolerant this time? Ha-ri watched Ji-hoon walk away, but something inside her told her this wouldn't be the last encounter between the two. She had just caught the attention of the most powerful CEO in Korea. And somehow, she felt that this would change her life forever. In the days following the coffee incident, Yoon Ha-ri did her best to go unnoticed in the hallways of Hanul Group. She still felt the tension from the moment she bumped into the CEO, and his intrigued expression wouldn't leave her mind. However, to her surprise, Ji-hoon seemed to have completely ignored what had happened. Or at least, that's what she thought. In the large meeting room of the building, Ji-hoon stared at a monitor while reviewing financial reports, but his mind wandered to something outside of his relentless routine. Since that day, he had noticed the employee who had previously passed unnoticed among so many others. Her courage in facing him unexpectedly had sparked his curiosity. "Mr. Kim, would you like to review the contracts before the meeting with the shareholders?" asked his secretary, interrupting his thoughts. "Yes. Leave them on my desk," he replied mechanically. That afternoon, while crossing the administrative floor, Ji-hoon couldn't help but glance in Ha-ri's direction. She was focused, typing quickly, slightly biting her lower lip, a habit he had noticed was common for her when she was stressed. He quickly looked away when he realized his assistants might be watching. On the other side of the room, Neri felt a shiver run down her spine. A strange sensation of being watched made her lift her eyes. For a brief moment, she met Ji-hoon's gaze before he turned away, resuming his distant and professional posture. Her heart raced. Why was he looking at her? Na-ri's confusion only grew when, the next day, she was given an unexpected task. Her supervisor approached her with an expression of surprise mixed with envy. Yoon Ha-ri, the CEO requested that you personally deliver the performance reports for the administrative team. This has never happened before. Her eyes widened. What? But why me? I don't know. Just do it right. And be careful not to make any more mistakes. Na-ri grabbed the documents and took a deep breath before walking to the executive floor. When she reached his office, she felt a strange mix of nervousness and anticipation. She lightly knocked on the door, hearing Ji-hoon's firm voice inviting her in. He was sitting behind the desk, impeccable as always, but upon seeing her, he set down the pen he had been holding. Yoon Ha-ri, his tone was neutral, but his eyes seemed to analyze every detail of her expression. Here are the reports you requested, sir. She handed him the documents, keeping her gaze lowered. Ji-hoon took the papers, but didn't look at them immediately. Instead, he observed Na-ri for a moment longer than he should have. Finally, he spoke. How long have you worked here? The question caught her off guard. 2 years, sir. I've never seen you before, he commented, more to himself than to her. Na-ri felt a mixture of frustration and amusement. That doesn't surprise me, sir. I'm just one employee among hundreds. Ji-hoon raised an eyebrow slightly. There was something in her response that made him want to get to know her better. But before he could say anything, the intercom buzzed, announcing the arrival of one of the directors. Na-ri took the opportunity and bowed quickly. Excuse me, sir. She left the room, feeling the weight of that encounter on her chest. On the other side of the door, Ji-hoon continued holding the reports, but his mind was far from the numbers. For the first time in a long while, something outside of the corporate world had captured his attention, and he knew it was dangerous. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions for Yoon Ha-ri. After her unexpected encounter with the CEO, she noticed that her coworkers were looking at her with veiled curiosity. Rumors began to circulate. Why had Kim Ji-hoon suddenly noticed an administrative employee? What was so special about her? Meanwhile, Ji-hoon found himself paying more and more attention to Na-ri. He was not a man of distractions, but something about her intrigued him in a way he had never experienced before. She wasn't subservient like the other employees, nor did she try to impress him, and that challenged him. One afternoon, Ji-hoon left his office to visit one of the administrative departments. The visit surprised everyone. He rarely left his floor, and his presence made the employees on alert. Na-ri, who was typing intently, felt a shiver down her spine when she realized he was walking directly toward her. Yoon Ha-ri? His firm voice made her heart race. She quickly turned around and stood up, bowing respectfully. Yes, sir? Ji-hoon's eyes studied her for a moment, before he extended a small black envelope. Tomorrow night, Hanul Group is hosting a charity event. I want you to attend. Na-ri blinked, surprised. I don't usually attend events like this, sir. I'm not asking. His response was short, but not rude. There was an undertone of expectation in his voice. I'll be expecting you. Without giving her room for objections, Ji-hoon turned and left, leaving Na-ri frozen in place, surrounded by the curious stares of her colleagues. That night, looking at the invitation in her hands, Na-ri didn't know if she was stepping into a fairy tale or a trap, but something inside her told her that this event would change her life forever. The night of the charity event arrived faster than Yoon Ha-ri had expected. In front of the mirror, she could hardly recognize herself. The navy blue dress she had rented fit her body perfectly, and her hair, usually tied up in a hurried bun, was now loose in soft waves. Still, the nervousness took over her. What did Ji-hoon really want by inviting her? Upon arriving at the luxurious hotel where the event was being held, Na-ri felt the weight of the stares on her. Everyone there belonged to a world that wasn't hers. Men in expensive suits and women in elegant dresses whispered among themselves as she passed. Her discomfort grew when she saw a group of shareholders exchanging curious glances. But before she could hesitate, a familiar voice resonated behind her. "I'm glad you came." Ji-hoon was by her side, impeccable in his black tuxedo. His eyes quickly scanned over her, and something in his expression changed. He didn't say anything, but Na-ri noticed the silent satisfaction in his gaze. "Thank you for the invitation, sir." She tried to maintain her composure. "Tonight, forget the formalities. Just Yoo-hoon." He smiled slightly, and the cold expression he always carried seemed to soften. Before she could respond, a sharp voice echoed across the hall. "Ji-hoon!" A tall, elegant woman was approaching. "Who's your companion?" Na-ri felt her body stiffen upon recognizing the woman. It was Kim Soo-jin, the daughter of one of the largest shareholders of Hanul Group and one of the most talked-about candidates for Ji-hoon, according to the office gossip. Ji-hoon remained impassive. "This is Yoon Ha-ri, my employee." The way he said it didn't help. Soo-jin raised an eyebrow and smiled calculatingly. "How interesting. I didn't know you were now bringing employees to important events." Na-ri felt the disguised hostility in those words. But before she could respond, Ji-hoon moved a little closer to her. "Yoon Ha-ri is special," he said simply. Na-ri's heart raced. Soo-jin's expression darkened, but she quickly regained her composure. "I hope you know what you're doing, Ji-hoon." With one last look at Na-ri, she walked away, merging into the crowd. Na-ri exhaled the breath she hadn't realized she had been holding. "Was that a problem?" she asked softly. Ji-hoon turned to her, and his eyes, this time, were filled with something she couldn't decipher. "Not for me, but for you, maybe." He extended his hand. "Shall we dance?" Na-ri hesitated for a moment, but took his hand. And as they were led to the center of the ballroom, she had the strange feeling that her life would never be the same again. The days following the charity event were intense for Yoon Ha-ri. Comments about her presence alongside Kim Ji-hoon circulated through the hallways of Hanul Group, and the indifferent glances she used to receive were now filled with curiosity and envy. More than that, her name started to appear in news and gossip blogs. Who is the mysterious employee beside the CEO? Na-ri felt the weight of that unwanted attention. Even more so, she began to notice a growing hostility coming from some superiors. It didn't take long for Ji-hoon's family to get involved. On a tense afternoon, Na-ri was called to the executive floor. Her heart raced when she saw who was waiting for her. Kim Tae-woo, the chairman of the board and Ji-hoon's father, sitting with his stern and unyielding expression. "Yoon Ha-ri, sit down." His voice was firm, with no room for questioning. She obeyed, keeping her hands folded in her lap. "Do you know why you're here?" he continued, his eyes analyzing every reaction she gave. "I imagine it's because of the charity event, sir." Her voice sounded more confident than she felt. The chairman let out a heavy sigh, as if dealing with an innocent child. "My son is a businessman. He doesn't have time for distractions. Be smart, Miss Yu. You're just an employee. There's no room for illusions." Na-ri clenched her fists, feeling a chill run down her spine. "I have no intention of interfering with Mr. Ji-hoon's work, Chairman Kim." He laughed, but without humor. "Then make things easier for all of us. Quit your job." The silence filled the room like an invisible wall between them. Na-ri's heart raced. Her job meant her security, her independence. But more than that, it wasn't just about Hanul Group. It was about Ji-hoon. And deep down, she knew something inside her didn't want to give up on him. Before she could respond, the door swung open forcefully. "Father, this is unacceptable." Ji-hoon entered, his gaze cold and furious. Chairman Kim turned to his son calmly, but his look was sharp. "I'm just protecting you, Ji-hoon. I don't need your protection. I decide who I want to be with." Ji-hoon stepped forward and looked at Na-ri. "And I won't allow anyone to manipulate her choices." Na-ri's heart raced. In that moment, she realized Ji-hoon was willing to fight for her, but the battle had only just begun. The days that followed were turbulent. The press couldn't stop speculating about the relationship between Kim Ji-hoon and Yoon Ha-ri. Inside Hanul Group, whispers became incessant. Tension with Ji-hoon's family only increased, and the board of shareholders pressured him to distance himself. Every step they took was watched. Every exchange of glances was interpreted. It felt as though the world was against the love that was blooming between them. But Ji-hoon was determined. That evening, Ha-ri walked through the park near the company, trying to organize her thoughts. She knew that if she stayed by Ji-hoon's side, she would face immense challenges. The class difference, the social pressure, and the empire he had to protect seemed like impossible barriers to overcome, but what she felt for him was too strong to ignore. Ji-hoon was not just a distant, untouchable CEO. He was the man who looked at her as if she were the only thing that mattered in the world. Then, a black limousine stopped beside her. The door opened, and to her surprise, Ji-hoon stepped out, without his usual corporate coldness. The night wind messed up his hair, and his expression was intense, as if he was about to make an irrevocable decision. "We need to talk," he said, looking into her eyes with a mix of urgency and tenderness. Ha-ri nodded and got into the car with him. The silence was thick, until Ji-hoon sighed deeply. He seemed tired, but also determined. "My father wants me to marry Kim Soo-jin. He thinks it's best for the business." Ha-ri's heart tightened. She knew this moment would come, but hearing Ji-hoon say, it made it all real. He wasn't just a man in love. He was the heir to an empire, and his family would do anything to ensure he followed the right path. "And what do you want?" she asked, her voice stronger than she expected. Ji-hoon took her hand. His eyes filled with a burning determination. There was something relentless in his expression, as if he was ready to defy the entire world for that answer. "I want you, Ha-ri. I want you by my side, no matter what happens." She held her breath. The weight of his words hit her hard. Ji-hoon was willing to challenge everything for her. But would that mean giving up his position, his family, everything he knew? She didn't want to be the cause of an internal war at Hanel Group. In the following days, he did exactly that. He faced the board of shareholders, refused family pressure, and publicly declared his commitment to Yoon Ha-ri. News outlets exploded with sensational headlines. Hanel Group CEO rejects arranged marriage for love. The controversy was intense, but Ji-hoon remained firm. He turned down corporate alliances that would compromise his freedom, even with his father threatening to remove him from the position. The resistance was fierce, but something unexpected happened. The employees of Hanel Group rallied behind Ji-hoon. Many saw him as a fair leader, willing to challenge outdated traditions. Younger shareholders began to support him, recognizing that a marriage of convenience wouldn't guarantee a strong future for the company. Over time, Ji-hoon's family, seeing his unshakable decision, finally gave in. His father, though reluctant, admitted he had never seen his son so determined and alive as when he was beside Ha-ri. 1 year later, under the starry sky of Seoul, Ha-ri walked down the red carpet toward Ji-hoon, dressed in white. The venue was filled with flowers, a space carefully decorated for the big day. Ji-hoon looked at her with a radiant smile, as if nothing else mattered. The company, the fortune, the pressure from society. Nothing was more important than her. "I promise to be by your side no matter what happens," he said, as he placed the wedding ring on her finger. Ha-ri smiled, feeling her eyes well up with tears. "And I promise to never let you face anything alone." When they finally exchanged vows, she knew. Their love had overcome all barriers. Now they were no longer just a CEO and an employee. They were a couple who defied fate and won. And together, they would write a new story, one that no one would ever forget.